there's a bigger issue here. Just because a group of people belong to the Federation, it does not mean that they are saints. The trouble is Earth. On Earth, there is no poverty, no crime, no war. You look out the window of Starfleet headquarters and you see paradise. Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise. Out there, all the problems haven't been solved yet. Out there are no saints, just people. Angry, scared, determined people who are going to do whatever it takes to survive.
What I want to know is, out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't?
My dear doctor, they're all true.
Even the lies.
Especially the lies.
On behalf of the Bajoran government
And the Promenade Merchants Association.
I officially welcome you to Deep Space Nine.
Welcome back to Especially the Lies, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. For those of you who are just joining us, or who don't have a memory from week to week, which, based on some of our fan comments, isn't out of the realm of possible either, we are a group of longtime fans of the Star Trek franchise and sci-fi in general, who have managed to convince some of our friends to join us yet again to rewatch a 30-year-old sci-fi show, this time Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We are watching week to week, no binging, no watching ahead. Well, at least not for our newbies. Those of us who have watched it have probably binged ahead a little bit just to stay on top of things. But we're pretty much doing this week to week just the way it was when this show came out, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. I am your host, Blake, and with me is...
Christopher.
Nicole.
Emily.
Prentice.
Mike.
And Chris.
So we usually kick these things off with a synopsis, and before we get into Christopher's spicy synopsis of the week, I want to take a minute just to comment on this episode, because when we were doing Grey 17, we really got into some social commentary episodes. We dealt with everything ranging from capital punishment to assisted suicide to the role of government, police, law enforcement, you name it. There was social topics all over the place that we got into with Babylon 5. And those conversations are what got Scott thinking about doing a show about Deep Space Nine. Specifically, the intro into these two episodes, Past Tense Part 1 and 2. And we've talked about this in our Prophets chat. We've talked about this amongst each other, that a few of us knew this was probably one of those episodes that he was looking forward to the most, to really see what this group would do with the social commentary and the discussion. And we've said it before, this is probably going to be one of those episodes where we miss that eternal ray of sunshine, as infuriatingly positive as that motherfucker could be some days, with his never-ending positivity and optimistic outlook, no matter how many times Christopher and I were actually right in the end.
So many times we were right.
Didn't want to be, we just were.
No.
So with that, this may be a difficult episode for some of us. It may not be. We will see where the discussion goes with this one. But let's go ahead and kick things off with our resident master of synopsises, Christopher.
Julian to Cisco. I thought the first rule of time travel was to avoid doing anything that would interfere with the past. Cisco, what's that? I can't hear you over the shotgun blast.
Okay. So what you're saying is we basically just threw the temporal prime directive right out the window and just said, fuck all the rules.
Right out the fucking window.
Alrighty then. Well, let's go ahead and check in with all of our newbies who have never seen this show, or at least hopefully haven't seen it and haven't been lying to us for 2.5 seasons. And let's start with Chris. Let's get your first impressions.
I liked the episodes. I mean, they weren't perfect. They had their issues, but overall, I did like them. This is kind of what I've been more looking forward to. The deeper we get into the series, was having consecutive episodes that continue a storyline. I mean, even though I did feel they rushed to the end at the conclusion of the second episode, I feel like it's kind of swept over some stuff. But I want to see more of this, because I feel like I get more invested if there are more layers, if there's more dynamic aspects to the storytelling part of this season. So these two episodes gave that, so I really liked it. I was kind of getting this is just my own personal thing. I was kind of getting caught up in the set design. I mean, I know it was the 90s, and I know this was way before green screen technology was where it's at today and everything like that, but it just looked so much like a soundstage that it kind of took me out of it a little bit. It was giving me like crazy Total Recall or Predator 2 vibes. The San Francisco, California stage being dressed up as an inner city, I was just like, ugh, stage design wasn't really good on it. But the content of the story I thought was phenomenal. It was heavy-handed without being too overt. I thought it was something that in the beginning when I first started watching it, I was saying to myself, is this just going to be like the worst day at the unemployment office ever over 2 hour long episodes? But then as they got into it and they kept digging into the story, it got very substantial. It got really real for me. So overall, I enjoyed it.
Nicole, how about your first impressions?
Well, it was an episode. At first, when it started and like they got thrown into that sanctuary and stuff, I almost didn't want to watch. I just knew it was going to be like, oh, this is going to be rough. But as the story progressed and as they met people and as things changed, it was interesting. I do feel like it was 2024 and it's 2026 now. We're probably not too far off from that with people not having jobs, people not having places to live. San Francisco has a huge homeless population, so it was a little eerie how realistic it was for the times we're living in, but also not completely out of the realm of some shit that could go down. So it was uncomfortable in that sense for me. I also didn't like how they were labeling people as gimmies and dims and stuff. I will say shout out to Bashir in this episode because he was asking all the right questions. He had all the right energy. He was like, these people can live healthy, happy lives with the right treatment, and this is so wrong. And he was asking Cisco all the right questions, and it really showed that even though he's kind of ditzy with the girls or whatever, he actually is intelligent and he actually cares, and he has a little bit more substance to him because he wanted to help everybody. I liked Webb a lot. He was awesome, and I was really sad that he didn't make it at the end. I thought it was crazy how Cisco just assumed that dude's identity. I also thought it was funny that the one security guard who was a hard-ass dick reminded me of an Italian from New York. When he was talking about the Yankees, it kind of reminded me of someone that I would know, like an old Italian guy who was pissed off at the world.
You would know old Italians that are pissed off at the world?
I know, right? What a shock. But I do like that he changed his attitude at the end. And I will say one of my favorite parts was when Kira and O'Brien were going to the different times and the hippies, when they gave him the flowers and then they disappeared and they were like, whoa. That was like a lighthearted, funny aspect that I think was needed in a heavy episode like this. And then the guy with the hat, I kept calling him Hat Guy, but what was his name? Did anyone catch it? CB or something something like that? BC?
Biddle something.
Okay. He pissed me the fuck off, but towards the end, I kind of sort of liked him, and then he got, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, overall, it was really interesting. There's just so much to say about this episode, so I'm going to shut the fuck up because I've already gone too long. But I really felt like this hit a little too close to home. It was a little uncomfortable at times, a little too realistic, but also had some good little comedic parts in there, which I think were needed in this heavy episode.
I love how Nicole says I'm going to shut the fuck up because I've talked for too long and then proceeds to keep talking.
You're welcome.
Christopher, let's get your first impressions.
I liked these episodes. Since I have seen other series, I knew of the Bell Riots, and to actually see them, it was not what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting something different, but this was good. You know, predicting the future is always a little bit, especially when you give a firm date, like it's always a little risky, and being so close to they were predicting 30 years into the future. And so some of the stuff like the fashion and everything, you look at it and you're like, what the hell are they thinking? But the invasiveness of like advertising was spot on and just kind of genius. The touch screens. So they got some of these little details right. And then the social issues, which we are no doubt going to get into and are very much a part of today. I mean, the episode was 30 years ago, and it felt like it could have been done today and been contemporary to the time. And you wouldn't really have had to change all that much. So I thought it was very well done.
Jessi, how about your first impressions?
Oh God. Yeah, I took a gummy, so here we are.
Oh, shit. God damn.
This episode was interesting, clearly, because it's 2024. And so my first impressions were this was a dope ass episode, and it was interesting because there was a lot of things that spoke to me. So yeah.
Let's go ahead and hop over to our first ones now, our longtime viewers. We keep changing what we call ourselves on this show. I think it's Prophets officially. We've bounced around with first ones and other shit. And
First ones was definitely from Babylon 5.
yeah, that was the B5 show. You know, hey, if
Or
it gets us a few
Prophets.
listeners from that show to pop over to this one, we'll try it out. Let's go ahead and kick things off with Prentice.
Hey, so, this is one of my favorite episode series. It touched on a lot of relevant things that are still present today. I will tell you, when I went to LA for the first time, and I went to go visit a friend near the financial, and before I got there was commentary about what has happened to the homeless in LA. And they said, well, they occupy one part of this. I'm thinking that was just a euphemism and that wasn't real. How we got down to downtown LA and the financial district is literally blocks and blocks of the unhoused. So in terms of closely predicting the trip, they really knocked it out the park. Great writing for the most part. I love that fact that it parters, so you got a little bit of a deeper episode. Some things I didn't realize on the second watch is that, one, Cisco mentions at the beginning of the episode, he has a sister. I did not pick up on that at all, that he had a sibling. I think he said his sibling lived in Portland. So that was interesting in itself. Also, you had a returning Star Trek alumni from the original series, Clint Howard. Ron Howard's brother is yet again in the series, so that was great to catch him in the episode. I would say another thing that I didn't know about, but apparently there's a connection this episode tries to make to series. The City on the Edge of Forever. Apparently, Kira and O'Brien arrived in San Francisco in the 1930s, around the same time that Kirk and Spock in the series or the episode City on the Edge Forever. I had no idea about it, but actually, after looking at it closely, I see the connection. So overall, great episode, great social commentary. In light of all the things that are going on, the one thing that really stuck with me is when Cisco talked to his thoughts on what happened. Bashir's asking him, why did he get? They just gave up. That line struck with me as I'm working in a space where we're talking about getting the care, getting people to get involved in their community. You're often struck with that phrase, they just gave up, they don't care, there's apathy at different levels. But at the same time, the episode gives you a glimmer of hope about how one man made a difference to change the narrative. What seemed to be impossible, these sanctuary cities being eventually dismantled, it was an act of a few, right? So I thought the message was good. It was kind of heavy, but it was a two-parter. They're trying to fit everything in this episode. So overall, I thought it was a great episode, prophetic in nature, and it was well done.
And the part Prentice is referencing with the connection to City on the Edge of Forever is there's a poster in the background when they beam into that 1930s era that is for a boxing match. That is the same poster that was in one of the background shots of City on the Edge of Forever. It's a reproduction. It's not the original set piece, but it is the same poster that was there. So it really does draw that connection back to City on the Edge of Forever. You know, we missed an opportunity. We could have had him watch that and try to guess the connection and totally could have screwed with him on that one, but
it's a bit flimsy. I don't know.
Darn.
Since when do we need an excuse, Mike, to mess with the newbies?
I feel like they would have come for you after you made them watch that episode and then revealed that was the only connection.
I will say in all seriousness, no, though, that is probably one of the greatest episodes of the original series, hands down. That episode was actually my introduction into Star Trek. I believe that was about the first episode I ever saw was City on the Edge of Forever. Mike.
I really liked this episode. It's funny because they gave it 2 parts, which I feel like was practically the minimum that they needed to do for this storyline. And honestly, what's funny to me is like I just finished watching the season 2 of the show Paradise, and like it's funny because each season of Paradise so far has been like a really self-contained kind of plot, almost set in the same world, same characters, but like a thing going on. And so like it made me take a step back from this and think like, man, if they had made this show today, this whole episode wouldn't have been 2 episodes. It would have been like a season of DS9, like an 8 episode arc, and it would have been fantastic. And as a result, The fact that it is only 2 episodes, it's clearly compressed a little bit, and it does, for various reasons, right? Timing, budget, etc., undercut a little bit of the importance out of it. But they did such a good job still of making this two-parter feel like it had a lot of weight to it because of the heavy social commentary, because of the impact on the universe, and frankly, the acting was all really top notch in it. I loved the choice of putting Cisco and Bashir together and in the front of the episode. Yeah, it really just kind of fired on all cylinders, and it wasn't without some shortcomings, but it really was fantastic.
And Emily, how about your first impressions?
This is one of the episodes that I think of when people complain about Star Trek being woke. Have you seen this episode? Have you seen this two-part episode? Because it is social commentary. Obvious social commentary. Very, very heavy social commentary. And while they're watching it again, there are some things that I'm a little questioning of. Overall, it's still a really good two-part episode. And it's probably my top episode for this.
This hot dog tastes awesome, though.
I was going to make a Jessi and a Wiener comment, but okay. Did you want to revisit your first impressions, or were you good with the ones you gave?
No, I think it was all, I think this episode is awesome. I think it was clearly, that the part that probably struck me the most was the doing your job, the way that you think you should do your job, and then versus how they think you should do your job. And we talked about it last week. I'm no longer a federal parole officer. Friday was my last day, and I hate the system, and I hate the way the system is, and I hate the way the system treats Black people and people of color and women and basically anybody that's not rich and white. So I'm done. I quit. So the lady talking about, she let the one with the criminal history in, and then she just started doing her job. That's exactly what I did, and it killed my soul. So for the last 14 years, 8 of which were federal, my soul died. So now I hope to get my soul back by doing something fun.
So this is one of my favorite episodes also. And as you said, Emily, this is one of those, for the people who sit there and talk about Star Trek has gone woke. Yeah, it was this way in 95, folks. It's been that way for, well, since the start. And this is one of the episodes that really gets to why. And I think the timeliness of it, watching this episode 30 years ago, and I'm going to provide some context here in a minute, some framing of current events or contemporary events to when this episode came out. But I think this episode is got some great writing. I think the acting in it was fantastic. Avery Brooks and Alexander Siddig in the Sanctuary District, as they were navigating through that, the individuals, even the supporting cast, I think played the roles very, very well, as far as the guest actors who played the security, the staff, the residents of the Sanctuary District. I think they all did a phenomenal job with this one. And even the bits on the Defiant with Kira and O'Brien trying to find them in those little transports through time. Prentice, you mentioned the callback to City on the Edge of Forever. They also had where they beamed into the 60s, which, let's face it, if you're going to have alien visitors or beaming in and out of a decade in history, the 60s would be the one, because you can just blame it on the drugs, and there is going to be no danger of contaminating the timeline, because they're just going to think it was a drug trip, and they will be fine. So all in all, again, I like this episode. It's one of the first ones, if not the first one, that has actually taken place entirely off station. We are not on DS9 at any point in these 2 episodes. You're pretty much on Earth or Earth of the past in the Defiant in this one. So they're getting a little bit away from the station. They're venturing out a bit. And I think it works. I think this is the type of thing they're able to do when they gave them the ship, when they gave them the Defiant. So for me, this episode is everything that the series is about. This is everything Star Trek is about at its finest. And from the writing of Robert Hewitt Wolfe to the support from the producers, all in all, just well done. Now, I mentioned I was going to provide some context of the episode to its contemporary times. So a couple things on this one. When they were filming this, an article came out in the LA Times. And in that article, it was a plan. At this point, it was a draft plan from the mayor of Los Angeles to create a fenced-in, quote-unquote, haven for the homeless. And it kind of landed with the producers and the cast of, we just are filming this episode. And here is this article in the LA Times talking about, we're going to create these havens for the homeless. And even Prentice, you mentioned the financial district. Robert Hewitt Wolfe, who was the writer, talked about some of his inspiration for this episode was when he was walking through, I believe he said it was San Diego, and saw this just large homeless community that visitors and others were just walking by and looking straight through and straight past like it wasn't even there, and were completely oblivious with this depraved indifference to it. So those were some of the pieces that went into the background and the creation of this episode. And for anyone who says you can't compare a 30-year-old show to current events, I think this one, and Nicole, you mentioned it too, this one hits a little close to home these days. Still, it hit close to home 30 years ago, and it still does now. So let's go ahead and jump into our discussion. And Nicole, I see you're ready to get started.
Yeah, before we kind of dive into the deep stuff, I just wanted to point out a couple things that were just observations that I made, which I thought were kind of interesting. This episode kind of reminds me of the Hunger Games in a way, because they all had the districts. The higher number you got, the worse off it was. And it was very similar in the sense they were fenced in or they had no resources. And by the time you got to 12, where Katniss was from, they had jack shit there. So it reminded me of that. And I almost wonder if it influenced that story because it seemed very similar. It also reminded me of if any of you watched Loki on Disney Plus and with the TVA and the timelines and all that. I was like, if they had the TVA, it would have fixed everything. But I also wonder if it maybe potentially influenced some of those kind of shows because obviously I didn't watch this when it came out. And it's just funny to me how I can tie this show, who's 30 years old, to shows and movies that are current. And it was just really interesting because I felt like there was so many pieces of this show in other shows that I've watched and that I like. And then the actual sanctuary city, it kind of reminded me of what I would imagine Skid Row is like in Los Angeles or Kensington in Pennsylvania. Just very people living on the streets. And the crazy thing is that there are areas like this, but without the walls and the confinement. So that I feel like was why it hit so close to home and it was kind of fucked up. And also the fact that it was 2024, this is 2026, and there are areas like that just without security guards and walls. They're all over the United States. So it was just eerie in a sense. It almost felt like a prediction that was too spot on to where we are in life. Like it just, I don't know. I just thought those were some really interesting correlations that I just kind of wanted to touch on before we dove into the actual social issues of the show. But the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just thinking of all these things that it was correlating to or reminding me of or whatever. Also, side note, authoritative Cisco, kind of hot. Just saying. Okay.
We've told you all Cisco was going to grow on you.
I mean, I liked him from the beginning, but now I'm just like, he's got zaddy energy.
And I think you mentioning that there are these areas that exist, and while some of them may not have walls or structured security, there are places where they do.
They're real too. Yeah, yeah. It's
I can comment in Oregon, there are areas where they refer to it as managed camping facilities or managed camping sites type thing. And what these are is these are homeless sites where they have put in like tiny homes, tiny shelters that are in fenced in contained areas that's where they send the homeless. There are other areas that are pretty much confined by geographic boundaries. A lot of times this has been parks that get designated for unmanaged camping, but there are still law enforcement presence and others that keep folks there. So I don't want to minimize this is still a very real, particularly on the West Coast. Like this is, I will say this episode takes place in San Francisco. This episode is very, very real to the West Coast of the United States right now. Jessi.
So definitely out of sight, out of mind, right? People don't care what happens to homeless people as long as they don't have to look at them. And that's kind of like when you hear people bitch about homeless people, it's when they have to be inconvenienced by walking by them or being asked for money or things like that. And so it does not surprise me that their fantasy world looks very much like our real world because we tend, like you just said, we tend to put them in places like we in where I live, I will not go into that, have a what they call a homeless camp. It's just a bunch of tents and like it's a city, right? But it's a city built on land that they are not allowed to live on. So they have been tearing down their tent every year. They tear them down. So right about now they'll start to set them up again. And every year they go and turn them or tear them down. And it is gross because last year they kept tearing them down and they kept putting them back up. And so then they started talking about ticketing them. Okay, cool. Because, yeah, homeless people just have all this money to pay your fucking tickets. So what do tickets turn into? Tickets turn into warrants, right? When you don't pay them. And depending on what they are, it's just this ever evolving way of controlling the narrative of people, the undesirables, the people you don't want to see. And for those of us who had Joan, and she would always talk about not in my backyard. And this is exactly a prime example of that because the upper class, or I don't know if I just missed what they called them, but the people not living in the sanctuary area were just oblivious to what was going on because they just don't want it in their backyard, even though it is in their backyard. And it's, everybody wants to preach these Christian values and be your brother's keeper, but just not in my backyard. I don't want to keep them.
Ah, the good old NIMBYs. Christopher.
So I live in DC. We have a lot of homeless, and we also have a federal government that wants to come in and just round everybody up and take these encampments down and beautify the city, and with no plan whatsoever to actually help these people, which was kind of addressed in the show, where Bashir was saying there's a lot of these people who have mental health issues that they should be institutionalized or hospitalized or medicated, and if they just got the treatment that they deserved or needed, that they would be able to live fully functioning lives. And the government didn't care, the people didn't care, there was no money, and it all strikes so familiar, and we just want to sweep everything under the rug. And the administration out here is sending in the National Guard to clean up these encampments. They are issuing fines, offering people to go to homeless shelters, which don't have any room, so they're going to be turned away. And the other option is drug treatment or jail. That's what they're doing. And so it really struck home that the police in this episode were rounding up those who didn't have identification, who didn't have a job, who didn't have any way of supporting themselves, rounding them up and throwing them in this sanctuary, which let's just call it what it is. They're throwing them into concentration camps to round them up, to make the problem go away so they can ignore it and make everybody else feel like they're okay.
Nicole?
I also thought it was a crazy juxtaposition because Dax ended up in this fancy hotel living with the high life with all the rich people and the fancy people. And when she was at that party, they were just talking about like the undesirables, and they did not give a fuck about what was going on or anybody else. And it also, again, reminded me of District 1 from the Hunger Games, but they were all rich and eating decadent meals and expensive things. And then you've got the rest of the population who is scraping by, who sleeps on the ground or cardboard boxes or can't get food or have no clothes or nowhere to shower. And like, it's just so, it was such a stark contradiction, but it was also, again, very realistic on how people don't care about other people that are deemed undesirable. And I just thought that was such a crazy difference, and how like just she was found by this guy who thought she was attractive. And then if any of these people knew she was an alien, she definitely would have gotten chopped up and killed or whatever. I also love how she crawled up through the sewer to go find them in her fancy clothes and all that. And they were just like, wait, what? You came through the sewer? Even like the DB guy or whatever with the hat was like, huh? And she convinced the rich guy to actually care. So I did think it was really interesting how they both kind of were in different worlds. And she was found by a guy coming up on the subway, and they were found by a security guard. If tables were turned, would it have been Dax in there? So it was just really interesting to see that kind of juxtaposition in the episode as well, to kind of also move the story along, where you had stark differences between, and even within the sanctuary, you had the gimmies and then you had the dims, which was fucked up that they were calling them dims. But I don't know. My favorite dim, though, was the one who said that Dax was a good alien. I loved that sequence. She was so nice to him, and they just treated him like a person, and they met him at his level and kind of met him where he was. And I just thought that was kind of a nice human touch in this shitty ass environment.
We'll jump to Mike here, but just ponder also and Ira Stephen Bear, the producer, commented on this. There was another difference between Dax and Bashir and Cisco and the experiences they had in this episode. Mike.
Well, yeah, Nicole kind of stole one of my points, and that was exactly that. It was the fact that you had the three officers basically picked up by the scruff of their necks and dropped into this terrarium, right? And it was by almost pure happenstance that they started at the same point and ended up at two radically different paths. One ended up on the safe path, and the other two ended up on Skid Row in the sanctuary, the camp. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I guess, what Jessi started to say, describing the experience is I just want to call it what it is. It's criminalizing being poor. That is the end goal that we are driving towards right now outside the window of my home. It's not just not in my backyard. It's that to the extreme where if somebody's just homeless and it's because of circumstances or it's because of mental health or whatever, it's a big moral dilemma. And people see that as gray, not black and white. And that makes it hard for them to wrap their head around what the right course of action is, because they want to do the selfish thing, not the thing that's hard, that takes a long time, that takes money, whatever. So the next step to circumvent the moral aspect of it is that you make it a criminal act. And by making it a criminal act, now you can easily push that out of the gray into a black or into a white, and it makes it real easy for people to justify what they want to do, which is to get it out of their face.
Prentice.
Yeah, so watching a lot of men came rushing back about role. I used to work for the city, and we had to deal with the unhoused population during the pandemic. And it was a struggle. Struggle because we had so many people that said, I don't want to see this. Remove them immediately from my site. And I would have to often have the tough conversation, say, it doesn't work like that. We have to coordinate with the city, Department of Family Support Services, make sure that if people have mental health concerns, we address those. If they have drug habits, we had to make sure we got teams out to address those as well. It's a very nuanced approach, but we got pillared in my office because people said, we want you to snatch them off. I said, you can't do that. I remember during that time period that somebody was set on fire in another area of the city because they got tired of the encampment. So the way they humanize the unhoused population in this episode, talking about the mental health concerns and how they try to be a little bit more nuanced, I appreciate that because I saw during the pandemic some of the worst of people in terms of how they treated others, whether it's the migrants. I don't care what your views may be on this. It's just treating people with dignity and humanity. And I'm glad this episode did touch upon those things because I've seen it done poorly. I've seen the people in the, let's say, high places. Part of my district was downtown Chicago that has a very different socioeconomic status than other part of the community that I worked in. And it was definitely that kind of out of sight. I don't care what happens to them. Out of my way. I paid too much for my condo. And it was sad. It was sad to see how people treated those that they believe were less than. So I'm glad this episode did bring up those topics. And one thing I do want to lift up, this episode had a great write-up about it in the Atlantic about 6 or 7 years. They deemed this as being the most political episode of Star Trek. So anybody wants to check it out, it's called Revisiting Star Trek's Most Political Episode. And the article's by Robert Greene II, and it was featured in the Atlantic.
If you get me a link to that, Prentice, I'll share it in the Patreon and Discord when we put this out and in the show notes.
Will do.
And I will say that you mentioned during the pandemic how bad things got, and we had a debate raging where I'm at in Oregon, and there's two city parks. Let's just say there's the two city parks. One is over on the edge of town, largely by an industrial area, very sparsely, I don't want to say sparsely populated, but a lower socioeconomic part of town. And the other city park, which was closer to resources, closer towards healthcare, closer towards like all of the resources that could have been better. But guess who lived around that park? The city mayor, the affluent members of the community.
Yeah.
Guess which park got the quote unquote unmanaged camping, which was basically we're going to dump all the homeless there and contain them to this area. And oh, by the way, we're not even going to offer any resources to the community surrounding the area. We're just going to let them all deal with it. And manage it all without any assistance. But by God, we're not going to put anybody where the services are. We're actually going to try then to get contracts to put services out there, but, well, it's a slow procurement process. And so, yeah, just that dehumanizing, as long as they don't have to see it, as long as they don't have to encounter it on a daily basis, that just indifference to human suffering and lack of dignity that some people can manifest in themselves, especially while professing to have Christian values or any values of just about any world religion. Because I will say, for those, in fairness, hypocrisy is not strictly a Christian value. It can cross multiple belief structures.
No, but it's very strong in some strands of Christianity.
Jessi,
Just so you know, that hot dog was good, but the Fruit Loops are even better. So,
you did have an edible to start this show.
it's been 25 years since I've had any kind of THC, so it's not as fun as I remember it. Now I
Is
just want
this
to eat
just a
everything.
THC one, or did you get the fully loaded?
It was weed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Just checking. I was going to say, if it's just the THC one, Christ, you're a lightweight.
My mom gave it to me. Sorry. Okay. So in the area that I live in, the shelters are absolutely garbage. So we don't want them living on the streets. We don't want them living in homeless camps. And the shelters that we give them are dangerous. And a lot of the times as dangerous as them sleeping outside on the street. So it's like lack of resources, lack of mental health resources, lack of substance abuse resources. In Illinois, mainly lack of mental health resources, because Illinois has cut mental health resources to the bone. Like it's not even worth it anymore. They do absolutely little to nothing for people. And so then you put them in this fucking shelter, and the shelter is straight up garbage. People get beat up there, they get robbed, they get it is a male shelter. So the women and family shelter, I think, is a little bit better. It's a little bit safer. But our male homeless people just get nothing. So we don't want to see them, but we also don't want to give them any kind of resource.
Nicole.
So when Mike was talking about criminalizing being poor, essentially, the crazy part about that is that most people, even with college degrees and full-time jobs, are one or two paychecks away or one or two disasters away from being homeless or destitute, myself included in this economy. I mean, if something crazy happens, I don't have savings, I don't have backup, I don't have anything, and I don't make enough to pay my bills if I'm not working. I work two jobs, actually. And I know a lot of people who have degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, and everyone is struggling financially. So the fucked up part about all of this is that most people are in the same boat where just one or two catastrophic things can put you there. But it doesn't mean that they're a derelict on society or they're a bad person. It just means a bad situation, right? But they're treated like they're the scum of the earth or called dims or whatever. Not everybody who is homeless or going through a hard time is a drug addict or whatever they want to label people as, like, or have mental health issues. Some people just really had the shit end of the stick. So that's what's so crazy about this. And even in some of the people in the sanctuary city, like Webb, who worked as a plant manager for one of the biggest plants around or whatever he was saying, all the people that were giving their testimonies about what happened to them and how they ended up there, most of them want to work, are hardworking people that just ran on a bad situation. And then they ended up in here and they're getting jumped and having to protect their buildings so they don't get robbed in the night or beat up. But in the reality of it is that that could happen to anybody unless you're one of the super, super rich fucks. But still, most normal, average people who are working and just trying to make it every day, it can happen to any of us. It could happen to probably, I would say, 70% of us on this call. You just never know what could happen. And that's the reality of the world. And the fact that there are criminalizing these people and treating them this way is fucked up, because that could be your sister, your cousin, your neighbor. It could be anybody. And that, I think, is fundamentally where the biggest issue is the way that people are treating people. I think it was Prentice about dignity and humanity. That's what the world is missing the most. And whether it's this fictional TV show or today. And it's just really wild to kind of see this from 30 years ago unfolding when we're seeing it right now unfolding in real time.
I just want to say, I do think there is like a large part of America that is one paycheck away from being homeless. I remember reading an article that, especially after the oh so wonderful fucking president, which I can say now, and his bullshit about inflation going down and the gas prices being $1.80, this dude is delusional. I honestly think it's worse now Well, I don't, and it's not just a thought. Like, I do believe that Americans are in a worse place at this point than we ever have been. Sorry, Christopher.
I'm just saying, I wouldn't mind adding one person to the DC homeless population.
Yeah.
Christopher.
Well, both Jessi and Nicole stole my point. They did a very good job of showing that wealth inequality is an enormous problem. And inside of the camps, you saw people who were just out of work. There wasn't anything wrong with them. They were normal people raising families. They were out of work. There was no work to be had. And they had to be in these sanctuaries as well. But I kind of want to make the point that how subtly that they made another point at the beginning of the episode when they split the two groups up, when they split Bashir and Cisco up from Dax. The white woman gets rescued and taken to the fancy hotels and to the fancy party, and she's given all the help that she needs to find her identification. And the guy who finds her is concerned that she was beaten up, that she was robbed, and wants to make sure that she gets taken care of. And Cisco and Bashir, who are not white men, are rounded up by the police. They're robbed. They're taken straight to the police station. They're not believed about who they said they are. They are processed and they are put into this camp. And they are told that they're never going to get out. So even though they didn't blatantly say anything about race in this episode, they showed it without having to scream it out loud. And I thought that was very well done.
I have a question. Did you say Bashir's not white?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, he looks like he could pass for a
He's
white guy.
Egyptian, I think, isn't he?
Middle Eastern.
Oh, Egyptian. I'm sorry. I thought it was okay.
Now that you say it, I can see it.
Mike.
So one of the other things that I kind of think is really clever about how this episode is written is they drop you in to the situation already well in progress, right? Sanctuaries all over and I think that it was very smart of not explicitly come out and say what the big event was that caused all this, because that would have made it very easy for the viewer to dismiss as, oh, that is haha laughable fiction or whatever. Instead, you as the viewer are left to interpret, is it one thing that happened? Is it a bunch of things that happened? What was it? And for me, it makes this episode very real and very timely, even 30 years later. Because as I'm watching this episode, I'm not going to go on a tinfoil tirade here, but we're in the midst of the AI revolution. And people in my industry are getting laid off by the tens of thousands right now, all over the board. And if I lost my job tomorrow, I'd be one of those people living paycheck to paycheck with no guaranteed chance that I'm going to go find a new job. So to me, like when I watched this, I immediately looked at what's going on in our world right now and kind of applied it to myself as, oh shit, this is very relevant. This could be it. This could be the thing. But like I said, I think that's clever because I think that is an intentional move to avoid letting people trivialize what the content of the episode is, what the message is.
Jessi.
So I have a question for the first ones or whatever the fuck you guys are calling yourselves. How far off did 2024 feel to you when you were watching it? Like, did it seem like super crazy far in the future? Because clearly we've already passed it right now. So I'm wondering how it felt when you guys watched it the first time.
I mean, for me, and again, I think part of this is situational and where people were from. Me being watching this as a roughly 12, 13-ish year old in the Midwest, this seemed pretty far off. Like there would have had to have been a lot of shit happen to get here. Now, I'm sure if someone watching this contemporary to this in Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, some other places, I'm sure even someone watching this in Chicago would have a very different read on it, even as contemporary as to what I would have in rural central Illinois at the time. If any of the other first ones want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to speak on that because I'm thinking back to being 14 years old when this came out in January of 95. That's when this first aired. There was a different sense of the future and what we were heading towards at that point in time. You're looking towards the end of the first Clinton term. We're heading for the year 2000. Yeah, it was a scare about Y2K and all that. But I think generally as a society, we felt that we were progressing towards something better, that we were getting past some of the issues. We had things here and there. 3 years before this, we had the LA riots, right? We had the conflict that brought about another reckoning about race, those issues, police brutality. But after that point, it felt like some things maybe have gotten better and we're heading towards the future. Now, if you'd have asked me in 95, 96, would this be the world in 24? I probably would have said, I don't think so. But so many things happened since 2001 that this kind of really changed the thought of what we would be as a country at this point, that now this episode, it makes sense. You're like, I totally see it happening because things have fallen apart. They've gotten that bad. But in 95, I generally thought by this time we will be in a very different place. So it is funny you asked that question. I wanted to speak on that because, yeah, in 95, I could never have told you that this was going to be the reality of the future in America. Now it's kind of like, well, of course.
And
Look at from 95 to now, you've had the Tea Party movement, you've had Occupy Wall Street, you've had the complete financial meltdown from the housing crisis of what was that, 07, 08 was when the housing bubble hit. You've had the dot-com bust, you've had all of these like major economic kicks to the nutsack, basically, that as Prentice said, the end of the Clinton 1 and even end of Clinton 2 just weren't even on the radar.
yeah, I mean, it's a sobering thought what Prentice has just brought up, and it's the fact that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I thought we were on a trajectory where we were making progress socially towards a better future. And then all of a sudden, it's like the cover has been ripped off, and all of this horrible shit was just there lurking under the surface, bubbling and waiting to come out. And now that's where we are. And for the first time, I'm kind of putting it into the context of like, this episode, what's happening in this episode could literally be the future still. And that's very, as I said, it's a very sobering thought. For me watching this, I guess just to add mine, I don't know. When I watched this before, maybe I'm focusing on the wrong thing, but they don't lean too much into the technology of what they thought 2024 was going to look like in the episode. In fact, everything almost looks backwards. It looks like it has a distinctly 60s vibe to it almost. Somebody took a big swing and a miss at what they thought future fashion was going to look like, I think. But you set that aside, and I think generally speaking, what Prentice said is true. That yeah, I mean, I think I watched this and I kind of thought, no, this isn't what's going to happen. I do recall that a lot of other science fiction that was happening or coming out around this time frame was more pessimistic besides Trek. There's a lot of other stuff out there like RoboCop that did not paint a very favorable look at what the future was going to be. And so maybe I just kind of got swallowed up in all of that. But nevertheless, I mean, no, I can at the very least say that I didn't think that this was going to be the future then, but I certainly see that it could be now.
Chris?
It's interesting to hear people like, yeah, I thought, Mike and Prentice be like, I thought, we were getting better and things were working in a positive direction. I didn't think about that after watching this episode. What I thought about was essentially just how history continues to repeat itself over and over and over and over again. Society has treated the downtrodden or those on hard times or those without or those with less differently than the people who have or who are, I guess, more successful, depending on the metric that you're looking at. But in this case, financially, and it's either along those lines or it's a different thing, right? We talked about religion earlier. It was a religious thing that had one group of people looking to cast down another group of people. It could have been a racial thing or an ethnic thing. I mean, somebody mentioned Nazis earlier, I believe. And then, you look at the internment camps of the Cubans back in the 80s, the internment camps with the Japanese here during World War II, just so on and so forth. It's happened so many times. Now we have the camps or the places that they're taking the brown people that they want to deport, right? It's like there's always the same game, or I don't want to say game, but it's the same story. And it's the same type of people who continue to do it. And I was thinking about these things and I'm like, the whole hope of all the wicked people or all the bad people or all the people with the wrong mindset who came up in the wrong era and can't change their ways, they're all going to die. And the progressive people are going to take over, and we're going to be the ones to lead humanity to a better direction in the future. And then bam, the shit happens again. It's because the same kind of people just seem to be hard coded into the fucking genetics of the human genome, and they keep producing these pieces of shit in mass droves who get in power and do this over and over and over again. So Prentice and Mike are talking about hope. For me, I just kept thinking like it's the same shit. It's the same shit. It's just a different group of people or different groups of people that are involved in different generations, but the story is always the same. That's kind of what I took from this. And maybe to put us a little bit of a silver lining here on it, it's not all bad. I like the fact that they did the episode and they told this story because it's like a wake-up call, right? It's like if we continue to do things a certain way, this shit is going to happen again. And it's going to continue to happen unless, like Cisco said, at least one person stands up to try to make a difference and inspire other people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but it always continues to happen. And I'm just wondering if the cycle is ever going to break.
Prentice.
Chris, a quick question for you. We were kind of asking the question to those that watched it before, how we view the future. When we first saw this episode, I know you didn't see this episode back in 95, and I think you were like 2 years younger than me, so you might have been 12 years old when this episode aired.
Yep.
Do you have a clear kind of memory of what you thought the future was going to be at this point in time when you were that age back in 95?
Yeah, in a way, not so much of like what's the future going to look like, what's the technologies going to be, what's the fashion going to be, whatever, so forth. But for me, if I'm going to be completely honest, I never really thought the future was going to be better than it is now or at that time, I guess. That never even came across my mind because I feel like without getting into it, coming up, I've seen some of the worst of the worst, and whether it's firsthand, secondhand, whatever, and experienced it and lived through it. And it wasn't something that came in a random encounter. It wasn't something that came in a once in a blue moon type situation. It was something or things that happened with family. So in my mind, if I'm dealing or suffering through different types of mental and then physical abuse, and I get it, my pops was Nigerian. He came up over that. That's the way he was going to raise his kids. But I can understand it. It doesn't mean it's right. So I'm going through discrimination from my own family members because I'm not white. It's like, so I'm getting hit with all this from a young kid, right? From the first time I could think back and I can actually start stringing memories together, not one random thing here or there, like really have a genuine conscious recollection of what I went through. These are the experiences I had with the closest people in my life, the people I'm supposed to trust. And so for me, when I'm looking forward into the future, especially in the mid 90s when race was still an extremely tense and hot topic, I never had the optimism that it was ever going to get any better. Did I think it would ever regress back to community lynchings and slavery or any of that? No. But I also didn't think it was ever going to get better to the point where it's like, we have hope for a federation type future where everybody gets along and da 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 da. Like I heard something today, people were talking about the United States of America was never more united than right after 9/11. Like that's when you would see people from all different races and cultural backgrounds and ethnicities and get together and not necessarily have the first thing that come across their mind or come out of their mouth be something negative towards the other person for an ignorant reason. But at the same time, when you think about that, you also think, well, yeah, that's because all of their hate and prejudice was being directed toward another group of people. That wasn't.
To say, is that the thing where it's like you unite people by having a common enemy?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But and then again, it's like, but it's still hate, right? And it's being directed just towards a different group of people. And even in that sense, it's not like it's completely contained either. It's not like all the hate and the racial prejudice and all of that, or whatever you want to say, discrimination that we had towards a lot of Americans had towards Middle Easterns was only going overseas and landing in those countries and on those people in the Middle East. They were enacting it here at home. just like when COVID started and people were in on Asian folks, and then you saw it wasn't siloed for a missile to go overseas. It was being enacted here, right? So it's like anything that's based in hate is just it's going to be ugly any way it goes.
Yeah.
And so you factor all those things together. That's how I felt the future was going to be. But I didn't let it eat me because I knew when I got older, I was going to be educated enough, physically capable enough, and then I planned to work my ass off so I could be financially stable enough to be able to A, assist in helping others, B, fight back when I needed to, and C, live comfortably. So it was a double-sided thing for me. But I didn't have the sense that I feel like you and Mike had that I think things are getting better and we really might have a better future. Like I never saw it that way.
Thank you for sharing that. One thing I did want to say, I didn't initially have that as my question. I want to give Chris the opportunity to speak. But the one quick thing, it has felt like to me, and this is going to be another sci-fi reference, the containment unit, like in Ghostbusters, was broken open in the last couple of years because all of the hate has come out. It's crazy. And Mike, to your point about science fiction and kind of dystopian, the vast majority of science fiction is kind of dystopian for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
Vast majority. So Star Trek was the only one that was really kind of positive in its orientation. But I'm glad they do these kind of episodes because what this episode showed you, and I'm looking at the bigger picture, sometimes it does get bad before it gets better, right? So they're talking about this watershed event leads to something beautiful. And that's what I always saw talked about throughout Star Trek, like this happened until this event happened, where we came together, got past some of these old prejudices, biases, and we built a better future. So in the work I do, where you have to work hard against structural inequality and trying to be a resource to the community, I have to keep that sense of hope and optimism in mind, because if not, I can't do the work I'm doing because you would simply just get depressed and stop what you're doing. So to that point, although this was a lot in this episode, I still take away from there was a sense of hope that this happened, but humanity will get better eventually after they deal with these issues. So I just wanted to make sure I framed it that way in terms of the conversation, my outlook in terms of, yes, it was messed up and we're living in a messed up time now, but I still believe there is hope for a better future. I yield the floor to Chris.
Yeah, no, that's the better way to think about it. Like I should definitely be thinking about it that optimistically. I can't, man. I've seen the worst in so many people in so many different ways in so many different times. And like I said, history just continues to repeat itself. I don't think we've figured out a way to genetically engineer an embryo to get rid of the hate gene or to get rid of the ignorance or to ensure a certain level of IQ or to increase or guarantee a certain amount of empathy and sympathy within individuals. Like we haven't figured that out yet. So as we continue to go through the natural way of producing offspring, the fuckheads and the pieces of shit and everything else across the board in that family of debauchery and ignorance, they're going to continue to be born and they're going to be raised in those same environments. And unfortunately, I think they're going to continue to be born at a higher rate than the good people out here. So I don't think the struggle is anywhere near going to, be over in the near future. And I don't know if it's ever going to be over. It just keeps happening.
Lower expectations.
There we go.
Yep. Very low, the lowest of the low.
I would say this is, and then I'm gonna jump to Emily. I'm gonna jump the order a little because Emily messaged me and wants to cut into. And I'm gonna say this is one of those areas that Scott and I would argue about a lot with his eternal optimism and him always calling me the pessimist, or what was it, Christopher? We were the eternal rays of doom, I believe he called us at one point.
Yeah, the eternal rays of doom, and he didn't want to hear our pessimistic outlook.
Yes. And I kept telling him that the only way we were ever going to get to that brighter future was we had to go through the darkest of nights first.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments I made to him was, and we were in a debate over healthcare is what caused it. And I told him, I said, you look at the reason why Europe has largely socialized healthcare, it's because it was created in the complete devastation and aftermath of World War II. There was a catalyst that pushed Europe to that model. The United States never had that push. And so that is the conversation that Scott and I would have repeatedly and argue with each other repeatedly, that you can't get to that brighter future without having that absolute rock bottom moment first.
Any day now, Canada.
Emily.
Okay, so this is related to what Chris was saying, and I wish I could remember where I read it so I could give the person appropriate credit. But it was basically, we know the genetic impacts of slavery, right? We know how that has impacted the descendants of those who were enslaved. And the question was, does the same apply for the descendants of the enslavers? Is there something in the genetics that makes you basically predisposed to apparently lack empathy and the ability for such levels
I
of
think so.
cruelty?
Low
I
IQ.
think so. Low IQ for one, but I mean, scientifically speaking, I don't know if you've heard of epigenetics before,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the way a person is and lives their lives can create micro indentations within the genome of their offspring to make them
Yep.
more predisposed to have the same personalities, act the same way, and do the same things. It's scientifically proven that this happens. So I for sure think that that is a reason why the same type of people who keep doing these same terrible things continue to be born because they are actual traits of people. And if you were raised in a family that all they did was slave trade or were slave masters, and then that happens for generation and generation and hundreds of years, yeah, I definitely think that that could be a specific trait. Now, to Mike's point too, though, I think there's ways to combat that, right? Just like if you are born prone to addiction, you can do certain things to make sure your lifestyle doesn't make you succumb or lead you to succumb to addiction. If you have a higher IQ and you are actually out here in the world living life, I feel like that can be a trump card towards maybe I shouldn't say trump card in this conversation. That could be something that could be something to help help protect you from your predisposition. So I definitely think there's merit to that, Emily.
Well, it even gets into political psychology. And
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I will say is I don't necessarily think IQ is the predictor because you look at some of these people on the right wing, the absolute frightening part, some of these people aren't stupid.
No, just
Yeah.
cruel.
They're just evil.
Oh,
You could argue they are cruel. You could argue they lack empathy.
Hmm.
But and that's the bitch of it. They're not stupid. And
a
that's what
lot of
also
them
gets
aren't.
me is when they go off attacking like higher education or institutions of education. You look at some of these. Ted Cruz was what, Harvard or Yale? He was one
Mhm.
of the,
Harvard.
Hmm.
Ted Cruz was Harvard. Tucker Carlson. Some of these people that are just out there spewing this absolute just
Bitching
hate-filled,
about the Ivy
hate-mongering,
Leagues
bigoted bullshit
went there.
Yeah.
come through the Ivy League. So there's definitely a nature and nurture component in it.
Hmm.
And it's scary. As someone said, the scary part isn't actually Trump. Trump is bad enough. The scary part is the person who comes along next, who looks at what he's done and
Yeah.
then adds the polish and the finish of it, that has the not quite the bullet and China shop mentality.
Yeah. I always said growing up and after I first saw it, A Time to Kill. I love that movie. But I always said that
Great book and movie.
Kevin Spacey's character, the prosecutor, was one of the most diabolical villains in any movie that I'd ever seen. And Blake, to your point, the reason being is that I just felt like his extreme intelligence and his acumen of being a prosecutor made him maybe one of the greatest enemies to the Black community in cinematic history, just because of you knew who he was at his core, right? But it's extremely well dressed up in articulation, in proficiency, and in just outright just education, right? Being intelligent. That character was extremely well written. But yeah, Blake, to your point, the IQ isn't a guarantee that anybody
No,
isn't going to be
certainly
bad.
not. And
Did you ever read the book of A Time to Kill?
I did not know.
I will say, if you read the book for it, if you think Kevin Spacey's portrayal hit that,
Hmm.
read the book.
Mm.
Yeah, it's worse.
Oh man.
Well, I want to just clarify too. Like my comment about IQ is 100%. I stand by it, but it's not that I think that's the whole case. Like I fully recognize the ringleaders of this are not low IQ individuals. The thing that scares me is the I call it the mob mentality, or it's the large majority of the base that I do think is driven by lower IQ individuals. And I think that it's not an insult. It's not me going, you're stupid. It's the fact that people with lower IQ have fewer mechanisms in their mental toolbox to cope with the world around them, to cope with situations, to not resolve problems in ways other than anger or hate, or as I mentioned earlier, to see things in grays instead of just strictly black and white. So I think the diabolical thing that we see happening right now is that the ringleaders know how to tap into that. They know how to tap into that hate and that anger to whip all of those people down at the bottom to a frenzy to fall in line and then parrot their talking.
Christopher.
So I kind of completely forgot what I was originally going to talk about. It had something to do with
Sorry.
it had something to do with what Prentice was saying. I think it was along the lines of what I really liked about this episode is that they showed kind of two different visions of the future. We have that vision of Starfleet, of the utopia Earth. And Cisco says at the beginning of the episode that this is an Earth that this is a very different Earth. This is something that you're not familiar with when he's talking to Bashir when they're figuring out where they are. And it's a future that is awful, one that we're living. And to think that it could get worse, that they're really going to have to struggle to come together. There's going to have to be, this event was what propelled things to get better, but there's still going to be struggles to come. And that is both kind of horrifying and optimistic at the same time, because you know what their vision of the future is and can be, and it's still, I don't know, it still gives me hope that we can come together. But the interim that I think we're probably in, that things are going to get worse before they can ever get better, is really chilling and kind of terrifying, and something that's not very consistent with what this series is normally about.
Jessi.
So a couple things to circle back, but there's a book called Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallin. He talks about how trauma, addiction, biases are passed through DNA. Like basically your embryo was in your mom when your mom was in her grandma. So line after line after line of trauma gets passed down to the next generation. And if you think how far back that goes, one of the examples that they talk about in there is a guy that at 19, just when he would get cold, he would start to panic. And it turns out that an uncle that he did not ever meet, his mom's brother, froze outside at the age of 19. And it's not something he ever heard about. It's not something that he ever knew about, but just from the trauma of his mother passed down to him, it was coming through subconsciously. So I do think that there's a lot of value to saying that people's bullshit is passed down to their kids. And I think it is going to get worse before it ever gets better. And then the other part was the low IQ, low education. You know me, I always say that I think it's a lack of education, because I don't know how much of it has to do with your actual IQ. You can be really smart and really dumb at the same time. So like, I just don't know. Going to Harvard in the Midwest, I took the right classes, right? And I got to sit in really cool, we've talked about this before, so I won't go through it all, but I got to sit in really cool sociology classes. But the problem is, I could have sat in the same sociology class as somebody whose father passed down Trumpism to him, and they're not going to hear the same things that the teacher's saying. They're just going to pish-wash it off and act like it's bullshit. So I definitely think that it's a lot of nurture and a lot of lack of education. And I think that there is some value to DNA in there. So that's my 2 cents.
Chris.
I wanted to ask the group, because we keep talking about how the riots in the episode were the launching pad for the change that came. What do you think, if it's going to happen, if you think it's going to happen, what do you think that event will be in our reality? Do you think it'll be a third world war? Do you think it'll be another global type of economic or health situation, another pandemic? Like, what do you think it's going to be that is going to an alien invasion? Like, what's going to bring us all together, right? In some great, difficult situation or tragedy that's going to spur us forward towards guaranteeing we have a better future.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a complete and total economic collapse
Mm,
because
Yeah.
that it's us having to realize that what separates us is not what we look like, but that it's those who are in power, those who have money are doing everything with that power and money to keep us down, to keep us under their foot so they can make more money, they can make more wealth, and things can be better for them, but they don't want it to be better for us. Because if we were ever to all come together and rise up against them and demand that we have healthcare, housing, just things that can make our lives easy. We're not asking for much, but if we can come together and convince of that, then they're going to get really scared. And I think that's what's going to be the catalyst is that people like us, many of us on this panel, are going to be in a situation where we're like, well, we don't have anything anymore. There's no jobs, there's no housing, there's barely any food. We're struggling to eat to survive, and we're going to have to come together and overthrow the system in order for there to be any change. That's what I think it's going to take.
I think that's pretty sure what the lead into Les Mis was, actually. But for me, it's going to be kind of continuing on what Christopher started, is it's going to be environmental and resource scarcity. I mean, you're seeing rising sea levels, you're seeing different weather patterns. There's already signs of resource scarcity in various areas, which there doesn't have to be, but there are resource scarcity issues that you're going to get into whole areas becoming uninhabitable. And I think that's there's going to have to be a complete rethinking of what national lines are. There's going to have to be a complete rethinking of what all of this means. And it's going to come from that, I think, that place of complete environmental and resource collapse. Jessi.
mm.
Christopher is a lot more hopeful than I am because I don't know. To piggyback off of what he said, I absolutely believe that it's going to come to the majority of the American people being tired of the stuff that they're seeing, right? The stuff that they're treating. Most people can't already afford food, can't already afford housing, but half of the fucking population still thinks that this man is God. So I don't know what it's going to take other than a complete and total economic collapse with zero resources for people. I'll piggyback on both of what you guys said, but I mean, when is the line? If we're not there now, where are we? Because we're not mad enough. People are not getting out in the streets. They're not doing the things that they used to do when people were standing in front of tanks during the Vietnam War. There were a lot of things that were happening that we are not doing anymore. And so my question is, where's the line? When are people going to be mad enough? Probably when they have absolutely nothing. And the federal government has spent centuries trying to make us understand that other poor people, other Black people, other Asian people, other Mexican people are the problem. So it's not going to go away overnight. They are not going to change, I don't think. I don't think there's going to be any fucking change there. It's going to take the American people getting to the point where we have had enough and we do the things that we need to do. And I don't know when that is because I know for some of us on this podcast, there was a lot of things that we couldn't do because of our jobs or other things. But like the people that aren't us, right? I would love to do it. I can do it now, but I couldn't do it then because my livelihood would have been out the window. But people that have no stock in the federal government aren't in the streets. There's minimal, and I say minimal, and I know that people are going to argue with this, but there's minimal protests going on. 1 million people is not a fucking protest when you talk about a complete and total government change. So it's going to take a lot more than a couple people. And I don't know what that looks like. And I hope it's not a complete and total loss of all of the fucking resources. But that's what I think it's going to be. I think people are going to, I don't know, when everybody's starving. What did I say to you earlier? A complete and total depression is the only thing that could ever reset our inflation prices. So I don't know what people, when they'll get mad enough, but I think that's the point, is when they get mad enough.
When you look at the billionaires who are funding their own space race now and talking space stations and going to different places, I'm not going to delve too far here, but go watch the movie Elysium. And I would say watch that because I think that's a lot more where we're headed is with some of the premise of Elysium. Nicole?
Yep.
So I had two thoughts. I agree with everything that you guys have said. I think it's going to come to a point. You can only hold people down for so long, right? You can only push people down before they start to riot and erupt and like rebel. So I do think that if shit gets too crazy, I mean, we've seen a lot of protests worldwide, which is good, but I think it's going to be even bigger than that because, like I said, you can only hold people down for so long before people start acting and make a change. And I also want to say, I think we would be silly to not think that we are immune to other attacks like 9/11, for example. There's probably already people here that might even be on that path already. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, with the way that the world is right now and us fucking with everybody else, it's just attracting attention. And the more you divide the people, the more it gives an opportunity for others to come in and try to conquer, right? Divide and conquer is what the age-old history books say that you try to do to a republic. So I don't want any of these things to happen, and I pray to God they don't, but I feel like it's either going to be people just having enough. I don't know when that is, like Jessi said, or something catastrophic happening and us getting some sort of attack or something. And unfortunately, it takes bad things like that in order to get people to get their fucking heads out of their asses. But even like we said earlier, after 9/11, people were nicer to each other, but there was still a group that was targeted and mistreated and blamed. Someone's always going to be a scapegoat. So it's like Chris said, it's a fucking cycle and it's wild. And like a lot of people in our age group, I feel like are trying to break these like generational curses and generational chains or whatever that keep us down. But I feel like the environment around us and the world around us makes it so hard to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I think and I fear that something really bad is going to happen in order to shake people up. And it could be an environmental thing. Look at the weather we've had already. I think Illinois has had a billion fucking tornadoes already, and it's only what, May? You know, we haven't even hit the peak of tornado season. And I think the climate and the environment is so fucked. I just recently watched Interstellar for the first time, and I'm like, is that where we're heading? Where there's no resources, there's no food, they have to get out of Earth because they can't keep it anymore. It's wild to think that.
Prentice.
Well, I'm not going to predict what's going to be a catalytic event that's going to change things, but it needs to happen. I would say right now, some of the work I do outside of my job is also organizing work and trying to get people to care about legislation and how they can make impact. And it is very difficult, even within organizations of people that say they care about these things, to get people to commit to the work of impacting the community, the work of advocating for others. And what somebody told me yesterday, it was profound to me because it said, Prentice, people are just getting hit over the head with so much all at once right now that people are disengaged because there's so much happening all at once. They're being bombarded. And because of the bombardment, which is, quite frankly, if you heard from other people, this is intentional to distract and get people so overwhelmed they can't react. But somehow we have to work through that to get people to care and to work for the betterment of their communities. And I hope we have some kind of breakthrough in the future so we get people to get out there and work. Well, no matter what your skill set is, no matter what you're advocating for within your own particular community or greater than that, I just want to see people care. I think there's a level of apathy that I'm constantly fighting. My barber, we had a conversation on Friday about why he doesn't vote, why he thinks it's a sham. And I have to fight constantly against these kind of ideas to get people to care about what's going on. So it is a struggle, and I don't know what it's going to take to break through, but I'm hoping we will get a breakthrough that people will start to get involved and care about how to make a difference in their community.
To be fair for your barber, though, we do live in a county, or I grew up in a county and you live in a county where dead people have voted.
Hey.
Sorry, had to throw a Chicago joke in there.
Vote often, goddammit.
Never stop voting.
It's a lifelong commitment and beyond.
and then some.
Jessi.
I just want to comment on something that Emily said, circling back again. So to say other people, it's not going to take much for somebody else can come in and divide and conquer. Our government is already doing an excellent job of that. And it's hard for me to see where people are going to get to their limit when our government has spent the last 12 years dividing and conquering. And I think we're more divided now than we ever have been in my lifetime, at least. So the short 29 years that I've been alive, but
Bullshit. Sorry, there's some dust in the air.
okay, I'm 32. So no, but I definitely think that I love the optimism that people had, but sorry, none of us ever got to see that happen. And I don't have a lot of optimism because, like you guys said, what's the next one look like? And the next one, and the next one. So we elect a good guy for 4 years, maybe 8. And then what's the next one look like? And it's just hard for me to understand where people are at when their own government is doing these atrocities to people. So I don't, it's not going to take another country to do it. Our government's doing just a great job of it.
They don't need anyone else to fuck it up. We can do it well enough on our own.
And I was going to say, as much as a couple of you have mentioned, like 9/11 kind of bringing people together, that may have been true to some extent of Joe Schmo on the street looking left and right and whatever. 9/11 also opened the door in a significant way for our own government to side-eye its own people. And it's a major contributing factor of how we got where we are now.
The Patriot Act. Nicole said it earlier in the group chat that it made some people more together. It's still hard for Muslims because of that. And it gets worse, a little bit worse every day. And now we're throwing in Gaza and Yemen and all of the other countries that you can characterize as terrorists. And what are they usually? So it's hard to.
So say it's not even that at this point. I mean, hell, Florida tried building Alligator Alcatraz. There's been talks of DHS wanting to establish other mass deportation camps. I mean, it's at this point, it's the scope is expanded.
Yeah, it's okay if they take away your rights, but guess who they come for next? I don't know when people are going to get mad enough.
Well, I was going to say, and you realize that a lot of this is at the lowest level, is where we hold on to things like that level of racism. Because at the top level, we know full well who helped defund 9/11, and we're cozying up to them on a political level in ways that we never have. So the people at the top forgive and forget very fucking fast when money gets
100%. We just went to Fiddler on the Roof. It's pretty hard for me to think about some of the things that go on in that play, watching them do what they're doing to other countries right now. So, and it's not clearly Israel. It's not even a Jewish thing. It's persecuted people are now persecuting others. It's very interesting to watch it unfold.
And I want to be very clear because we've been accused of this on this show. And I think it's important to state there's a fundamental difference in anti-Semitism aimed at people of the Jewish faith on the basis of their faith or ethnic origin, and criticism of the actions of the government of Israel. There's a very stark difference there.
Yep. That's why I made a very clear statement that it is not a Jewish thing. It is an
I just
Israel
figured it was worth repeating for the folks in the back.
Yes, no, and I agree, but because when I said it, you know what I mean? I know what I know, or I know what I'm trying to say in my head, but it needs to be very clear that it is not any sort of religion issue. It is a country issue based on religion. So that's a totally different
I mean, I have no doubt you know in your head what you want to say. I just question which voice in your head is telling you what you think you want to say. Prentice.
Some people said, I think many of us said after 9/11, we saw so many of us getting together and there was this kind of common cause. But 9/11 did present something that's always been well known to me growing up, the stories that were shared with me about America and different things that have happened. So the day of 9/11, I was a student director for the University of Chicago. We were waiting for students to come in. They were not able to come to Chicago because of 9/11, but I'm still directing other people under me, making sure they have what they need school year. And that night, that evening of 9/11, went to a store. And this is the first time in my life that I've seen the Confederate flag in real life. About 159th and Harlem in Orland Park, as I was going to the 24-hour Target, people with shotguns in the intersection, waving the Confederate flag in this kind of we're euphoric that we're going to kick their butts and we're going to do this. I saw that and I was like, this is such a crazy moment. This is supposed to be coming together, but you have still this kind of hate and this kind of view that you don't even see yourselves in, that it takes the other to really see that. So for me, and to Chris, I wanted to say this. Although I expected the future to get better, if I was 15 years old, I always had the duality understanding the history of this country and what this country is capable of. So when people are saying nowadays, I can't believe this happened, I can't believe, I said, have you read your history? Because for sure you're capable of this, and this has happened before. But also to the end, trying to end on a happier note, we've gotten past these things in the past. It took a lot of work, a lot of advocacy, a lot of struggle. But these things have happened in a cyclical pattern. And I do believe that although it seems dark now, it can get better.
Jessi.
Just a PSA to all of the people in Illinois and really anybody above the Mason-Dixon line. If you have a Confederate flag, you just look like an asshole. It doesn't make any sense why somebody in Illinois is carrying around a Confederate flag. I was in Virginia the first time I saw the biggest Confederate flag I've ever seen in my entire life flying on the highway. It was right before right before DC. And I had to remind myself that Virginia is the Old South. So it is not okay, but it's a education and a low IQ thing. If you're still flying the Confederate flag, you're a loser. They were traitors. But anybody in Illinois or above that fucking line just looks like a pure fucking asshole.
Poser.
By God, don't you dare give out participation trophies, even though they love to wave their loser's flag. Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jesse, I think you're right. It doesn't make sense when you look at it from a historical context, but they don't look at the flag as purely a piece of history. You know what I'm saying? So that's a symbol for them. And I know they're in the north, maybe not as deep as they are in the south, but they're definitely running rampant in the north. So seeing a Confederate flag up here doesn't surprise me. One of my ex-girlfriends, she was born and raised in Memphis, a black woman, told me, and I'll never forget this in college, she told me, she said, you know what I like about home that I probably really shouldn't, is the fact that when someone doesn't like you down there, you know that they don't like you, and they'll tell you that they don't like you. And it's not always in this, it's not like in the overt, like movie cinematic racist over the top type of ways, but they will tell you plain out, like, I don't like you, and this is why. But you said up north, people will smile in your face, they'll give you a hug, they'll have you over for dinner, and then the second you walk out, they'll call you a nigger. And it's the same hate. It's just one group of people from one region or more tend to put it on Front Street and let you know, almost like, look, let's just get this out the way. I don't like you, which means you probably don't like me. So let's not even try and do this fake small talk thing. It's like that scene from that movie with Jason Bateman, the spelling bee movie, and he's there for his kid's spelling bee, and some other dad tries to, hey, so which one is your kid? And Jason Bateman just looks at him and goes, this, I'm good. Like just, just straight up passing on the small talk. There is none of that small talk in the South when racists see the people that they're racist against, and the people that they're racist against see them knowing that they're racist. It's just like, we know what it is. But up here, right, they'll have it hanging in their basement, in their utility closet, but they don't have it flying outside the front of their house like they do in the South.
Shit.
So I'm not surprised.
Shit. They do it up here.
Yeah.
Or down here. I guess I'm technically down here from you guys, but that's the thing. I got into it with somebody in Wisconsin, Illinois over the flag. And let's be very clear. If you are flying this flag, I just assume you're a racist asshole. That's just it. That's just my automatic opinion of you. I don't care if you're from the South. I don't care if your fucking family were a bunch of traitors. I don't give a fuck. I just think currently in 2026, you're just a racist fucking asshole. So I got into it with somebody in Wisconsin Dells.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
And I said,
yeah, I was gonna say, where's Wisconsin, Illinois?
yeah. Oh, did I say Wisconsin, Illinois?
You did, and I had to Google it before I called you out.
Make sure there's not a Wisconsin, Illinois.
Like, well, I'll be damned.
Jesus Christ, there is one. There's a Mexico, Missouri. So, no, sorry. I just opened my mouth. Things come out lately. So I got into it with them about this flag. And I said, I don't, because he came and asked my mom if she had any. And I was like, my mom doesn't sell that bullshit. And he looked at me and he's just like, listen, I'm not one to keep my mouth shut, clearly. And two, I think you're an asshole. And he's like, well, the very first thing he hit me with, which proves it every fucking time, is did you know black people own slaves? Sir, what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Let me hit you with that whataboutism real quick.
Yeah. Let's talk about the very tiny fucking portion of black people who maybe owned slaves. But what did that have to do with the flag? Oh, it makes you not racist because black people own slaves? Shut the fuck up. That proves my point right there.
And owning on paper to maintain family structure is different than actually enslaving people.
Clock it.
But that's nuance.
So I think that runs us through our discussion on past tense part 1 and 2. And as we said at the lead of this was one of the episodes that Scott was looking forward to. Given the social commentary we had on Grey 17, he knew we were going to have some fun with this one. And Christopher sent me a message on our back channel chat and said, this is the point where Scott would have called us the pessimists. And I responded back and said, yes, he would have, but he would have been loving every goddamn minute of this debate and this discussion. And he would have. And before we get to any questions and predictions, and I'm not sure there will be any out of this, but we'll give it a go and see if there's any that come from this. But for those out there that talk about Star Trek being too woke or it being too unrealistic or whatever the people want to claim their problem of the week with the Alex Kurtzman era is, or any of the franchise, I would argue what we're going through now, what this episode talks about, it is more important than ever that we have shows that depict that brighter version of the future, that have that level of optimism that Scott infuriatingly brought to our discussions, both on the show, in group discussions with us, off the show, privately in one-on-one discussions. Now more than ever, we need those shows that depict that brighter future, that depict that future where the bullshit that is being used to divide us now, whether that be race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, body image, weight, gender identity, any of it, where you have that future that says none of that matters. Anyone can be who and what they want to be and be accepted for it. We need that now. We need that message now more than ever. And these shows bring that. So let's go ahead and grab some questions and predictions if we have any from our newbies. And we'll see if we end up having a chat with the prophets after this. Christopher, let's start with you.
So they mentioned the Dominion at the beginning of the episode. They were going to a symposium on Earth to talk about the Dominion. So when are they going to be popping up again?
Dude, you've worked for government how long? A symposium is nothing but an excuse for people from multiple jurisdictions to get together and drink, for fuck's sake.
Right. I'm sure that's exactly why they keep mentioning them. Bashir seemed to be totally unaware as a human about any human history. What the fuck is up with that? Was it just a plot point where, like, Cisco had to explain why there were these districts? Or is there something with Bashir that why he wouldn't know the history of humanity? It just seemed really, really odd that somebody that smart didn't know what the hell had happened. Other than that, I got nothing.
Talk to some kids these days about history. There's some very bright kids that don't know jack shit about history. Just saying.
Yeah.
And so that she doesn't go fuck herself, Jessi, how about your questions and predictions?
So I have no questions and no predictions, but hear me out. What if I bought a plot of land and we start our own society? It's not a cult. It's not a cult. It's not a cult.
It's a cult.
It's not a cult. Everybody's welcome. There's a
with
democracy.
The personalities on
oh shit.
This team is definitely going into a cult. What kind of cult? I don't know, but
I think we might skip straight to the murder-suicide part.
He's going to be like that one.
Drink the fucking Kool-Aid.
Just crime scene.
Jonestown. Mm-hmm.
What was the cult lady who put Cisco in the box?
What's this?
Alexis.
Alexis. That's going to be Jessi.
Oh my God. I get
Jessi.
angry every time she's even mentioned. I fucking hate her so much. Anyway.
Well, folks, you've heard it here. Jessi's going to get some land and start a cult.
I said it's not a cult. It's not a cult.
It's definitely a cult.
It's you guys can all have a say in the leadership. It'll be a
So it's a comment on paper, but
so
in
what are
reality,
the cult leaders?
There's too many freaking chefs in the kitchen on this podcast, so there won't be any cult leaders. There will be somebody will establish dominance. It's probably going to be Emily, and then we're just going to have to do what she says.
At least we'll have a
there's a
very horny
plan.
library.
I mean, I was gonna say, the leadership bar is set pretty fucking low right now. So
Nicole,
I think any one of us could
what
do
is your
better.
role in the cult going to be, as well as your questions and predictions?
Oh gosh, I've got a lot of thoughts, but my only question is does the Grand Negus's nephew ever get out of the clink?
I forgot
Damn
about
it,
him.
I meant to bring that up. Okay, real quick.
Detour.
Sorry to interrupt. Cisco and his little rap back and forth with Quark, I thought was awesome
Yeah, it was good.
because he's quoting the rules of acquisition back to Quark.
Mhm.
And to me, that was kind of like a follow-up of their previous episode where they got stranded together and like he was kind of looking down on Quark and Quark put him in his place. I'm choosing to believe that Cisco went back home and looked at himself and was like, damn, maybe Quark had a point, and now he's getting up on his Ferengi a little bit.
Okay.
The end.
Chris, how about your questions and predictions?
No real predictions. I guess just question is, did this event, this time travel, trying to keep the timeline intact, is that going to still have some type of residual effect in the future for the team and whatever they encounter?
And I just can't believe we made it through a whole episode where someone was wearing pajamas and we didn't get a single commentary about Cisco's pajamas and nightrobe. Just saying, it came up quite a bit during Grey 17, anytime someone was in pajamas.
Right, but that
No, it came up when it was women in pajamas. And
Yeah, I
Jakar
get it.
in the robe.
correct.
Because there was
Correct. Yeah, I was too busy listening to him fucking pull out his daddy voice and yell at people to worry about his jammas.
that just unlocked a new kink for somebody in here.
Was not a new kink.
Wow.
I thought he was fine from the beginning.
And on
so.
that note, you have been listening to Especially the Lies, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. We will be back next week with life support as we continue our watch through Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 3.
Oh God, they're
yes,
gonna
they
love
are.
it.
No, I saw the thumbnail. I didn't watch it. I saw the thumbnail and what they were wearing. I know it's
So
gonna be some fun.
that's why I just saw the title and went, oh, okay.
Oh, it's gonna be.
We
a
will be back
good
next week with
one.
live support. In the meantime, if you want to join the conversation, you can check out all of our links down below. And if you want to get access to our Discord, and God knows what we've got going there. Apparently, I have learned all new things. We apparently have a sub-thread on the Smut Corner now on smut cliches, and apparently there is something there about tuna and bays of fish, and I will let you all who want to join our Patreon at any level to get access to our Discord go figure that one out for your own selves.
I am saying that little tidbit from one of our Patreons is worth the $3 membership.
You really
just
might want to go
read it.
check this one out. It is, yeah, go check that thread out if you're a member. And
It is
if you aren't, go
spectacular.
ahead and sign up and check that out. And don't say we didn't warn you in advance. Until next week, I have been Blake, and with me has been
Christopher.
Nicole.
Emily.
Prentice.
Mike?
Chris?
And Jessi, who apparently sounds stupid.
Thank you for listening to Especially the Lies, a Deep Space Nine podcast. You can find all the places to listen to and watch this podcast by searching for Especially the Lies on your podcast app or on YouTube. We want to hear from you, so join the conversation at Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review where you are listening to or watching this podcast. Especially the Lies is not affiliated with, and the podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Paramount or any other owners of the Star Trek copyright. All clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of the respected copyright holders. They are included here for purposes of review, and no infringement is intended.
Why have you brought me here? Show yourselves. What do you want?
The Cisco has returned to us. He arrives with questions.
There are always questions.
Welcome back to Visiting with the Prophets, where we're going to try to go through our newbies' questions and predictions. Emily, where do we want to start?
All right. Christopher wants to know when the Dominion
Season 4.
returns. Yeah. So he got a bit.
No, I think we get season 3, because don't we get a Jim Hadar episode later?
I was going to say, don't.
Yeah, near the end. They'll be back, but he's not going to get... Okay, let me put it this way. The Jim Hadar are not going to get him off until season 4.
I thought Wei Yun showed up in no?
All right. The downside of binge watching this is I never know when shit happens.
One thing I want to say while Emily looks up what's looking up. Chris mentioned the fact about Bashir not knowing that time period. Given that that's almost, he is separated from that by almost, 400 years or so? 300, 400 years?
Yeah.
I would kind of expect that some people may not know every single nuance in history or certain episodes. So that tracked, and I thought that made it seem more realistic that he didn't really know early 21st century history. I don't know very well, 17th century?
Yeah.
I'm not going to know everything. I know the general themes, but I don't know those particular incidents. So
yeah.
I thought that was a realistic depiction, of the character.
I was going to say, I likened it to Juneteenth. Most people learned or heard Juneteenth for the first time, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I mean, it's very similar.
Okay. So we get the female changeling in episode 14, Heart of Stone. But I'm thinking Christopher's wanting Jem'Hadar Dominion battle.
Yeah, season 5.
Which, yeah.
They're going to be a little disappointed with how long and drawn out.
4 is going to be good, and when they realize that everything that starts happening is all Cold War back end stuff.
Yeah, and season 3 ends with the adversary, so I mean it pops up, but not what they're wanting. Okay, does the Negus's nephew get out of jail?
They never follow up on that.
No one cares. Did this time travel event have an effect on the future?
Yes, because Nog will have a pad about Earth history that shows Gabriel Bell looking an awful lot like Commander Sisko.
Yeah.
And doesn't it come up with Section 31 when they start?
It won't be Section 31, but there's going to be 2 references to it. One will be the pad that Nog has about Earth history when they're taking him to the Academy, which I think is in Little Green Men in season 4. And they'll reference, doesn't this look like Captain Sisko? And then the other is after the end of the Trial and Tribble Actions episode, because he gets visited by the temporal police.
That's
temporal
right.
internal affairs, and they mentioned then about the incursions.
So I mean, they're both kind of jokey, throwaway references, but
for some reason my brain just combined them with Section 31 weirdos.
Here's a question of my own though: do we ever hear a mention of Sisko's sister again? Because after that episode, I completely forgot they had mentioned he had a sister.
Homefront, they mentioned the sister.
Really?
Never meet her, but they mentioned.
You meet his dad, but not the sister.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is that the only sibling? Okay, gotcha.
And I think Nicole's gonna be really happy when season 4 starts and she gets authoritative Sisko.
With the goatee and they shave head.
Yeah. Yep. Comments might start to get real spicy in season 4.
So, do you guys know, Blake, you were talking about this early in the episode, basically how this was one of the first episodes in the series that takes place where you don't even see DS. And that hadn't occurred to me that was true. And it was because they got the Defiant. So they got some legs to walk away from the station and go explore and do other things. I mean, was that really the sole purpose of them introducing the Defiant? Were they finding the show to be stagnating, sitting in place?
That was some of it. They wanted to broaden the stories, and they knew where they wanted to go with the Dominion. Ira Stephen Bear kind of had that track of where they wanted to go, and the thought was, you can't have this station defended by these 3 little runabouts. The original idea for the Defiant was actually going to be like a souped-up version of a runabout, not even a full starship, and then it kind of evolved into the Defiant, which, as they said, then a byproduct of that was they could open up stories that got them off the station more.
Yeah, I do remember that was a big criticism, and I also remember that when this season rolled out, they made it a big point to talk about the new ship and addressing the issues about they don't leave the station, things of nature. I have those TV guides still that they have the interview. It's in storage in the house, but what they explicitly go through and talk about. We created the ship. There's going to be more action now. We're going to do this X, Y, and Z. So it was interesting to see how the criticism was partly behind this to create the.
It's interesting because we saw we saw Babylon 5 basically kind of do the same thing. The White Star.
Well, I jokingly said one time during Grey 17, "Oh look, the Defiant's here."
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It's funny you mentioned that too, Prentice, because that was exactly where my head went. Is like I remember looking at the TV guide where they where they introduced the Defiant.
All right, what we got next?
That was it.
Well, I think that answers all of our
It was
newbies
short.
questions and predictions and takes us through our discussion of this one. This has been a long one, y'all, but it's been a good one. It's been some great discussion, and yeah, we get to and it's funny because this episode is so worthy of discussion and so much in it, and we have it framed on either side by fascination and life support. That's going to be some interesting ones. So thanks for taking this ride with us, and hope you enjoy. Have a good night, y'all. I guess we should do an outro, shouldn't we?
Everybody.
Meh.
Yeah. we don't always.
Good enough.
Let's be fair.
Have a good night, y'all.